Hey there. I offer this podcast freely. Your support really makes a difference. To make a donation, visit reneemckenna.com. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about feeding your demons. And our demons are our fears, our unresolved emotional issues, our past trauma, our limited ideas about ourselves, and our misunderstanding about the larger consciousness system in general. And a lot of what might be called demons are considered defensive structures from a psychology standpoint. Our self-righteous anger, our judgments, our egotism, our worries and insecurities, our internal criticism, dysfunctional relationship patterns, addictions, compulsions, distractions. Some of our demons are big, and some of our demons might be tiny. And every time we indulge in them or let them take us over, we are feeding them. And as humans, we all have lots of demons, big and small. And I think the word demons is actually quite appropriate because a lot of them seem to have a life force of their own, and we're pretty powerless to stop them once they get going. I know as someone who suffered from chronic anxiety and lots of different addictions and compulsions, there have been many times and circumstances in my life where I felt completely powerless over the mental chatter, over my feelings, and even over my behavior. And there's a different way to feed our demons. It's actually the name of a process developed by a modern Tibetan Buddhist Llama, Llama Tsultrim Allione. I've had the great privilege of sitting with her at a couple different trainings and retreats. She was the first Western woman to be ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist nun in the early 70s. And she has a retreat center in Colorado called Taramandala. In this process, she's developed or brought into the modern world, which she calls feeding your demons, is the answer to one of my prayers in how to do negative energy extraction, which is called depossession in shamanism. It's called exorcism in Christianity and some other traditions, and how to do that in a safe and effective and compassionate way. And if you want to learn more about Llama Allione and her perspective on feeding your demons, she has a book by the same name. It's available on Amazon. And they have a certification program through Taramandala, which I participated in a few years ago. And we started to work with negative energy extraction and defensive structures in my mentorship program this week. And I thought I should share this on my podcast to the wider audience because it's beneficial for everyone. Because we all have demons that need feeding. And this is a really practical, accessible, and profound way to dissolve, to update, and to restructure our own internal operating systems. What I like to call our inner IOS. And most people have lots of different defensive structures, lots of different systems that they use to move through the world, to organize themselves, and to try to be socially acceptable and successful. Or at least a lot of ways to not get hurt. And a lot of these systems and belief structures and emotional defenses develop as children, trying to figure out how to get their needs met in imperfect family systems, with caregivers with their own set of issues and problems and imperfections. But these coping skills develop unconsciously, how to navigate mummy's moods, daddy's alcoholism, bullies at school, a nasty or a needy sibling. And so children develop ways, their own unique perspective of viewing the world and their relationship of it. It really is special and unique to each person. I'm very good friends with an adult brother and sister pair, and she chose the path of being the overachiever, getting scholarships and being the captain of the swimming team, going to a potted Ivy college, very serious and uber responsible woman. And her brother was the class clown, quit school when he was 16, and is kind of an easygoing, fuck the rules guy. And they're very similar in a lot of ways. They even look alike to some extent. They're very close. They even have the capacity to judge each other equally for their different operating styles. And both of them are very successful in the world, completely different perspective and way of moving through it. Now, if the way that you're doing things in your life and the way that you have your inner dialogue with yourself is working for you and it's comfortable, awesome. But if it's causing you suffering, existential angst, dysfunction, then those are the demons, which are usually old structures, survival mechanisms that maybe worked for us and actually helped us survive at one point, but they've outgrown their usefulness and they've never been updated. Because again, these structures develop unconsciously and we don't even realize they can be updated. In fact, one of my beefs with Western psychology is that it's mostly dealing with the symptoms of these underlying core structures. And the reason I love the open door growth and spiritual psychology work is that it actually deals with those underlying structures, and then the symptoms dissolve when the structures are repaired or let go of completely. Because a lot of these things we don't need anymore. For example, I had tremendous abandonment issues because of the neglect that I felt I experienced from my parents and the lack of emotional bonding that I had with them. And so I had these built-in systems of always having my foot half out the door, ready to run in any relationship, always expecting people to reject me, even though that didn't happen very often. I lived my life in a very defensive position so I wouldn't get hurt, so people wouldn't leave me, and it kept me completely emotionally unavailable. In fact, the thing I wanted most, which was deep, loving relationships, I was incapable of participating in because I was always halfway out the door. And as I worked with my own inner demons, the wounded parts of myself that had felt neglected, and came to love and care for them and to bring them into connection with the larger consciousness system, the gods and goddesses of my own internal pantheon who have unconditional love and compassion for me, it became clear to me that as an adult, I can't be abandoned. People can leave me, but it's my responsibility to care for my deeper soul self and to connect with my spiritual family, which is infinitely loving and connected to me. I will never be abandoned by the universe because I am a part of it, inseparable from it. And there's a difference between being left and being abandoned. And abandonment for children is actually a survival issue. If a child is abandoned, they will die, unless the wolves come to raise them. But as an adult, if someone leaves, I have lots of choices of what I can do with that. I might not like it, my feelings might be hurt, I might be sad, but becoming emotionally mature enough to be able to move through those feelings is part of my work as an adult human. And if someone doesn't want to be with me, then I have to trust the larger process that there's something better for me, that we weren't a match together. And if I'm attached to people who don't want me, that's my own dysfunction. And learning to move toward those who do love me, that I do resonate with, that's my work. To grow in open-heartedness, in resilience, to be able to tolerate the verities of life, and the disappointments, the losses, and the new births and gains, to take risks, to navigate this field of impermanence that we live in. I want to tell a little aside story about this idea of abandonment. My ex-husband had a coworker, Tin. He was born in the middle of the Vietnam War, and his father was killed by the North Vietnamese. And when he was 8 years old, his mother sent him off on a refugee boat with 10 other people because she feared he was old enough that the Viet Cong might kill him too. And they didn't bring enough supplies on that boat, and they almost died. When the boat landed, and I'm not sure where it landed at first, they were all dehydrated and emaciated. And Tin became a street child, and he washed dishes and did other odd jobs for food and lived on the street with the other children. And ultimately, he got in touch with some family members, and somebody sponsored him to come to America. And he learned English, put himself through school, and he became an electrician. And he has his own children now. So it's an interesting question how old we need to be to survive on our own. I'd be curious what his inner demons are, but I find that an incredibly inspirational story of survival, resilience, and success. Anyway, I have tremendous respect for immigrants, the courage it takes, the drive to survive that they're able to draw from. So back to feeding your demons. So any distress, any dysfunction, any fear or compulsion or bad habit we have could be seen as a demon. And in shamanism and Tibetan Buddhism, which is very shamanic, it's understood that everything has a form. even these more etheric or nebulous ideas or energies like anxiety, depression, addiction, self-hatred. And certainly if we pay attention to them, a lot of them have a voice, and they certainly have an energy or a felt experience in our body. And when we open our active imagination, our more non-rational ways of knowing and gathering information, and open to the possibility of allowing these energies to take form, we can work with them in really powerful ways, get incredible information from them, and transform them or perhaps dissolve them completely. It's quite a profound process, and the reason that I use it and teach it, and I'm talking about it right now, is because it really works. And I use this process frequently on myself, still to this day. I've done it probably 100 times over the years, if not more, just on myself. Now, maybe I came here with a few more demons than other people. I don't know. But I really want to share the power of this process with you because it's simple and actually really easily accessible. And the thing that's special about the Feeding Your Demons process is that it's a very feminine process. It's based on compassion. And the older, more traditional ways of approaching negative energy, like exorcism or depossession, are actually more violent. They're less wise, and they're even a little more dangerous. So if we approach our anxiety as if it's an entity in its own right, or our addiction, or our self-criticism, or our judgment of others, or our self-righteous anger, it's a pretty enlightening process. And so this work really blends these more magic, mythic ways of understanding difficulties in life, because from the more tribal traditions in which shamanism and even Tibetan Buddhism is rooted, people's worldview didn't include a lot of self-responsibility and the understanding of psychology and even spirituality that we have today. If bad things happened, the gods were mad at us. The devil made me do it. The demon rum possessed him and made him an alcoholic. But when we understand that we all have inner demons, that they're actually energies that are part of our unconscious or that we tap into, and yet still hold them as their own energetic forms, it's a much more complete approach that allows us, again, the power to transform and even dissolve these often very powerful structures in a conscious, compassionate way. And so how the process works is that we pick an issue we're going to work on. What's the demon you most want to dissolve? What's the thing that's causing you the most suffering, angst, or rage right now? Now, a lot of times we get juice out of these things, so you have to be willing to let it go, because a lot of times these structures actually work with us and work for us, and letting them go means we're going to operate in a different way going forward. Now, the good news about this process is it isn't just about taking away the old thing that doesn't work anymore. It's actually about also connecting with a new, more productive, constructive, dynamic energy or ally, and installing that or connecting with that, receiving a transmission of that energy into our psyche so that we have a new structure going forward. So the process of feeding your demons is first to locate the issue that you want to work with, where it lives in your body, really getting concrete about it. And then you sense or feel or imagine moving that energy out of your body and it personifying itself in the room with you, with limbs and a head and a face. And then we ask it questions. We can step into that energy and feel what it's like. We can ask it what it wants, what's its purpose, and what it most deeply needs. And most of the time, if we look deeply enough, even the most destructive internal structures, including self-harm, suicide, homicide, if we look deeply enough, they're generally rooted in some twisted idea of self-preservation, of protection. And then using our active imagination, we dissolve ourself into a nectar or an elixir that's the exact quality of what this demon most deeply needs. Because we are all individual units of consciousness of this infinite, larger consciousness system, purely with our intentions, all things are available to us. And this nectar flows to the demon in unlimited supply. And it can feed and feed and feed to its complete satisfaction. And the demon is either transformed into a helper or at least into a more benign and helpful state. or it dissolves completely. And if it dissolves completely, then we ask for an ally to appear from our incredibly creative and generative universe. Actually had a lot of angelic energy show up in these processes with my clients. It might be a light, color, an element, a spirit guide, an animal, an aspect of their own authentic self that has only their highest good in mind. And we ask that form, this new, more productive, constructive configuration, we ask that a series of questions and bring that energy into our body, particularly into the place where that demon used to live. And this doesn't make any sense intellectually, but I'll tell you it's one of the single most transformative processes that I've ever come across. And the thing I love about it is that it is a win-win for everyone. It elevates everyone's consciousness, including the energy of the defensive structure itself. And this is a process that was developed in the 11th century by a female yogini named Machig Labdrang. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, enlightened beings often return again and again as bodhisattvas. And it is understood that Llama Allione, although she doesn't say this herself, is the 9th emanation of Machig Labdrang, bringing this amazing work over and over again to humanity to help them heal and transform their inner demons into allies. And if you go to my website, reneemckenna.com, to the Inner Journeys drop-down, you can go to Inner Journey number 5, Releasing the Inner Critic. And it's a slightly modified Feeding Your Demons process. And again, you can use this process on any issue that's causing you suffering in your life. In my book, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, I focused on the inner critic because that's one of the most common blocks to people doing their own inner work. But you can just substitute the word inner critic for whatever it is that you want to work with. And it's important to update our own internal operating system, just like it's important to update our tablet, computer, or phone. If I'm trying to run my life programs from 2022 on a system that was developed in 1993, we might run into some problems. So I encourage you to check it out and update your own inner iOS using Feeding Your Demons. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like a free download of my book, there's a link in the show notes. If you'd like to find out how spiritual psychology work might benefit you in your life or learn more about my year-long mentorship program, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon, and blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.